And thanks everyone for joining us for our webcast today on a demo of the EXS single buyer EXIM Online application. I'm going to go straight into that right now. So bear with me while I switch screens. Okay. I'm trying to get the EXIM Online. There you go. Actually, I'll use this one. So bear with me, I'm just going to sign in here. This, hopefully you're familiar with, this is the EXIM Online log on screen where you enter your user ID. Now we're using what we call the test environment. So what you're seeing is a demonstration of the completion of an ESS application online, but in the test environment. So this is just make-believe, if you will. So when you log in, hopefully this screen will look familiar to you. This is the home page. We are looking at the exporter's view, just so you know. It looks almost identical to the view that you as a broker would see when you log into EXIM Online. A couple of differences in terms of how some of the links are worded and whether or not there's a reference to or a link to the ability to view commissions, which would appear on your screen as a broker, but not on this screen as the exporter screen. So as you would to start any insurance application, we're going to go to the link on the upper left-hand corner, apply for insurance policy. And we're going to be given a drop-down screen that will let us choose from the various short-term and medium-term insurance products. And we're going to go for the exporter single buyer insurance. And then we're going to go over to the continue tab and press that. And this takes us to the beginning of the application. And here you'll see some very basic but useful instructions. And we do encourage you, and we encourage you to encourage your clients to take the time to read these instructions. It may save them some difficulty as they walk on through the application. A couple things to be aware of, and something that's probably a little known. There is this little need help link here, which on some of the screens does actually provide some useful background information that may help you or the exporter interpret what's being asked for on the screen. Some of this information does need to be updated, but there are still some that are actually helpful, and I'll try and point those out as we go along. As you know, on the right-hand side of the screen, we've got links to each part of the application. You can fill them out in any sequence that you wish. And as you complete each section, a little check mark, like the one you see here under the Done column, will appear to it, indicating that you have actually completed providing all the information that is asked for on that particular screen. Another link to be aware of, a very useful one, which I encourage folks to look at before they start any application, is the country limitation schedule. This, as you hopefully know, is a list of EXIM Bank's policy or risk appetite, if you will, for all the countries where it does or does not do business. So if you have any questions about whether or not EXIM is open in a particular country or open for a particular type of buyer or tenor, this is where you want to go. And maybe we'll just click on that to remind everyone what that looks like. It takes you directly to this page, which is on the website. And it lists all the countries alphabetically. Excuse me. You can select the name of the country by clicking on the letter here. There are also references to various notes down here. And those are very important because they tend to provide certain limitations or qualifications on the information provided in the table for each of the countries that's listed here. So we're going to go back to the application. Where have I gone? Did I close myself out? Mm-hmm. Okay, sorry about that, guys.
You may be able to pull it in if you drop down. If you can go back.
Okay. All right, let's try that again.
This is Amy. I'm just going to remind everyone to ignore that red message over what Ed is typing, because this is just the test environment. That's not a real message. Don't panic.
By the way, we can see if this will actually work. If you started an application, exited and want to start, continue it, there is a separate link to do that over here. But to avoid any further delays, let's just go ahead and restart a new one. So there we are, that's the page we were on. So with that, let's then begin filling out the application, and I'm going to use the continue buttons at the bottom of the pages, so we'll fill it out in sequence. This is the first section of the application. It's asking for basic information about the exporter, and you'll note that anything that has an asterisk along the side is required information, so you will have to fill that out. I'm going to pick a particular industry type here. Tile and terrazzo contractors. So we have to answer some questions here about the profile of the exporter. Some of these will default based on how they have been filled out before. Does the applicant have any affiliates? I'm going to say yes here. I'm going to intentionally trigger certain prompts so that we have a fairly comprehensive view of the different information we'll be asked to provide or questions will be asked depending on how we answer these different questions. You'll see it's here, it's defaulted to some information that I previously entered with respect to the name of my parent company, sales volume and number of employees. And let me just point out that the information for sales volume and number of employees applies, if I'm not mistaken, to the parent and the exporter, not just the exporter. Important point to remember. And the second part of the screen down here is where you select who you want to be the primary contact for this particular application. And there's a drop-down screen here where you can add a contact for this application. In this case, I've already used two previous primary contacts before, and I can either select one of these, in which case it will populate at the bottom of the screen, or I can say add a new contact, and it will let me fill these out manually. I'm just going to pick Joe, and I'm going to double check and make sure I've filled everything out. I believe I have, so let's press the continue button down here. Okay, and now the next section of the application asks us to address some general questions here. These are pretty straightforward. The first one, and again, all of these are asterisks, so you do need to fill all these out. The type of coverage, whether it's comprehensive, commercial and political risk, or political only. That will default to comprehensive unless you're asking for political, in which case you need to change that selection. Will the applicant have title to the products at the time they are shipped? You will say yes. Will the applicant be directly invoicing the buyer? We'll say yes. I believe if you click no on that and you try to continue after answering the other questions, you'll be blocked from continuing the application. So you want to make sure that you're answering this question correctly. Next question, is this a submission of an application that was previously deemed incomplete, withdrawn for other reasons, or are you requesting renewal of an active policy? So we'll say no. And primary reason for applying for this policy, you've got three choices: risk mitigation, financing, to extend more competitive terms. So we'll check risk mitigation. And lastly, the primary point of contact for the application. Now, this may seem somewhat redundant because EOL, as you know, will automatically send all communications to both the broker and to the exporter. In the ESS application, you're given an opportunity, or the exporter is given an opportunity to indicate if they have a so-called primary contact perhaps for communications other than those that come directly from EOL, I don't think it really matters at the end of the day how you answer this question, because it's common practice for the underwriters to copy the broker and on any communications sent to the exporter. So it probably doesn't really matter how you answer this. We'll put the broker though just to move on. Okay. We're going to get some questions as we go along, and just I know from experience these webcasts tend to go on longer than we usually think they will, so I'm going to defer any ones that can wait till the end until the end of the broadcast, then unless the context tells me it's more appropriate to address it right away. So we're going to continue to the next section of the application. And here's where you're going to indicate who is going to have access to this application. The first block lets you pick a broker. If you, the exporter, pick a broker, if you have one, obviously it defaults to none. But you can select either from brokers that are already associated with this exporter. In other words, they have gone in and previously associated themselves with a particular company. Or even if they've done that, they want to select a different broker, they can do it by using the next selection. So let me just show you what that looks like. I can select from brokers already associated with this company. Now, just for demonstration purposes, I've entered one here that actually is no longer an Ex-Im Bank broker. So I don't want you to think we're showing any favoritism here. Or we can check to select a new broker, in which case a drop-down list of all registered brokers will appear. And just so you know, we are continuing a comprehensive process of vetting this list and removing brokers whose names should not be on there. We're getting very, very close to that, by the way. But hopefully the exporter will find the broker they are looking for in that list. So I'll just check the broker since you guys are brokers. There are also opportunities to give both a financial institution and what on the screen is called a city-state partner, which we now call a rep. These are used very, very rarely. And as you can see, even if you select a financial institution to view the application, which you might want to do if there's a working capital loan, for example, on this transaction, it will default on the left-hand side here to restrict to view only, so they can only view it. And then I would suggest you not change that if, in fact, this is going to be used. And I would venture to say there's probably no circumstances under where you necessarily want a rep to Regional Export Promotion Program participant to see this application. So I think in practice this tends to become not applicable. So we've selected our broker, we've granted our access rights. The broker, after clicking continue, will now be able to go into their Ex-Im Online account and pick up this application. So you as the exporter could actually save and exit the application down here and contact your broker and tell them you started the application and give them the tracking number, and they will be able to find it. Next screen here is asking you to indicate special coverages that you may want. There are 4 coverages in particular here where you are asked to provide information or to be aware of certain information. This is one of those screens where it is useful to click on the Need Help button here. Here you'll see a description of those 4 coverages and some background as to what they provide and what they're for. I'm going to click all of these, again, because I want you to see as much of the application as possible. I've clicked all of the ones that require details, so let's open those up one at a time. This is the warehouse question. It's asking you whether or not goods are going to be shipped to a warehouse. And you have to indicate whether it's owner controlled by you, the exporter, or whether it's a bonded warehouse or neither. Now let's just say it's a bonded warehouse. And the location. It does ask for the country, by the way. It's defaulted to the U.S. It's conceivable it's not in the U.S., but in this case, we'll say it is. The appropriate regions and states, I believe, will populate if you do check a different country, I believe. Okay, so these goods are going to be shipped to a bonded warehouse in Laredo. We're going to continue, and that will take us back to the screen. It's, as you see, it's indicated a check that we completed that section. So I didn't need to fill out all those checks to begin with, since we do need to do these one at a time. So let's go to the next one, which is enhanced assignments. And here there's no information to provide, but important information that you need to know about what needs to be submitted to Ex-Im Bank in order to be considered for this. One very important thing to know is that this is only available for small businesses who meet certain criteria. Yeah, and I think Amy has some each one.
This is Amy. It's good to see this screen because we are doing enhanced assignments under multi-buyer policies. We don't currently have any under single buyer policies.
Okay. So we're going to continue. That will take us back to that question. I'm going to click it now. Next one that requires some information is pre-shipment coverage. And here it's going to ask you certain questions related to pre-shipment coverage. It's first asking you, provide the reason for pre-shipment coverage. And here we'll say, these are not necessarily the ideal type of information to provide, and I'll defer to my colleagues in the room if there's something more better to put as an example. So here we're going to say this is long manufacturing lead time before we actually ship, during which certain events can occur which could incur a loss. Next question is provide the date and the contract was executed or the anticipated date of signing. We'll put today's date. Next question, provide the estimated estimated period between the contract date and the final shipment date of items. So I'm just going to say that it's 0 years and 6 months. And then lastly, provide a schedule of any progress payments made or to be made by the buyer during the pre-shipment period. So here you'd want to indicate the dates and the amounts. Just to save some time, I'm not going to write that out. But you do need to provide that information if there are any such progress payments. So that's that screen. Let's continue, and that will take us back again to our special coverages screen, and this time we will select foreign currency coverage. And here you just need to indicate which currency in which you want the insurance coverage to be provided or denominated in. And here you just select your country. This is, not sure this is a very common. I'm going to pick the United Kingdom, but
Might be.
Let's do this.
It might be British.
Is it under British? Yes. British pound. Okay. And then it's asking, is the supply contract denominated in U.S. dollars or foreign currency? And we'll say foreign currency for the sake of argument, since we're asking for British pound coverage. And we'll click continue. So we've now selected those 3 coverages. I'm going to select these other ones too. We'll reselect enhanced assignments. Just to flag any other special requests that may come up along the way. So having done that, we're going to continue on to the next section. And here we're going to be providing information about the various participants in a transaction. And this screen is just giving you some instruction and some background about how we define the different types of participants in the transaction. This may be one of those places where this information is provided. Yes, so under this need help, here you'll see a brief explanation of how we define each of the parties in a transaction, and these will appear on the next screen when we press continue. So the information you see here is essentially the same information that just popped up on that blurb when I clicked on the Need Help link before. So here again, it's stating to you the different participants in a transaction: an exporter, a supplier, a buyer, end user, guarantor, agent, and borrower. You don't, and in fact are not likely to have all of these participants in a given transaction. And I would say probably for a single buyer transaction, as long as you have an exporter and a buyer, that's probably going to be enough to get you through the application. If there is a guarantor, you definitely do want to enter that, and you'll have to be given the opportunity to do that if there is one. There are some cases where the end user and the buyer are the same entity, and probably that's the case in most cases, in which case you don't need to fill out end user, you can just fill out the buyer. You'll see at the bottom, this is where it will display the various participants in the transaction. It will always default to displaying the exporter as the exporter, but it does give you an opportunity to view the information provided about yourself. You can also edit it, or you can remove it. If you click on the assign role, which you shouldn't have to, it does give you the opportunity to actually reassign that particular entity to a different role here by deselecting and selecting the appropriate party here, but it's already defaulted to the exporter. So we're going to go back to our screen here.
This is Amy. Just to add one thing to that, oftentimes single buyer applicants go in there and check supplier for themselves as well. It's very common, and I understand why they do that. It's actually not necessary, but they're welcome to do that if they want.
There is a link to the short-term credit standards, although I'm not sure this link is currently working. We're going to revisit that, but it is a handy reference from time to time throughout an application. So we do want to add our buyer, so we're going to go to the bottom of the screen and click on Add Participant. And this screen will look familiar to you if you've filled out other application forms as well. This is where you can first search to see if the particular entity already exists in our database. And if it doesn't, then it gives you the opportunity to create a new record for a new entity. And first it's asking you whether or not this buyer is a corporate or an individual, and it's a corporate. I'm going to check Mexico as the country of the buyer. And here I'm going to start typing the name of the buyer and see if Ex-Im Bank identifies it as existing in the system. So I started typing the name of my buyer, and you see there are a lot of companies already in the database whose name starts with the word Industrias, and in which case you would just simply select that particular buyer, and then you would press continue. Now, if the buyer did not appear, so let's try and make that happen. You'll see how I've typed Industrias Ex-Im, and it says no matches found. So that's when you're going to want to add a new participant. And that will take you to this screen. You'll see there are only a few items here that are actually required to be filled out. But generally speaking, the more information you provide, the better. So we're going to add a new entity here. We've indicated Mexico, so you can see it will pull up the relevant states and provinces. And I think that's all I'm going to need to fill out, or the minimum, I believe. If so, we would click Add Entity down here. All right. No, it's saying I need to fill out the city. Ah, I missed that one. So I entered my city. I'm going to go try and add it back again. And now it's asking me what type of participant is this. This is our buyer, so I'm going to select buyer. And I'm going to press continue. And you can see we've gone back to the list of participants screen, and our buyer has now been entered here down in the table at the bottom of the screen. There is this entry here, and there's a reference to it at the bottom of the instructions to this various name and this assign button. You shouldn't have to use that. It generally will take you to a screen that will let you choose only a supplier. So I'm going to skip that right now. We have no guarantor in this particular transaction, but it would take you through a very similar process that we just went through if you indicate that there is a guarantor. So I'm going to press continue to go to the next section. And here it's asking me about whether the exporter or the supplier have any affiliates. And it's a basic yes or no question. I'm going to click yes here again to see if it asks me for any additional information. And it does indeed. It says describe any direct or indirect ownership interest or family relationship that exists between any of the participants. So I indicated that there was a relationship. I'm just going to say that Cured owns 5% of the supplier. And I'm going to continue. It's taking me now to the next section, and this section deals with identifying who the primary source of repayment is. And typically that will be the buyer, and you can see that that is the case here. It's defaulted to providing the buyer. There may be situations where the buyer is not the only consideration in who the primary source of repayment is. In this particular case, we're indicating that, in fact, it is the primary source of repayment, and we're clicking that box. I'm going to click continue because I think it's going to ask me, no, let's go back. There is this rating button. It does ask you if the entity is rated. And so let's click on that. And it's going to default to there being no market ratings. But if you have one or know of one to add, you can do that. So we're going to click the add rating button. And this screen will appear and will allow you to fill out various bits of information with respect to that particular rating. So in this case, we're going to say, yes, this buyer does have a long-term rating by S&P. In order to populate the correct rating scale for the agency that we chose, we need to first click on this button. That will pre-populate the rating scale in this first drop-down. So now you can see we have the S&P rating scale here. It's going to ask for an outlook. We're going to say it's favorable or positive, I think is correct terminology. And it's asking for the date of the rating, and we're going to say that that was provided on January 1st. Did I miss something? Oh, thank you. Okay, so we've entered our rating information. Let's continue and see if we've done that correctly. We have, and that takes us back to the screen we were at before, and now we can press continue. And here it's going to ask you to identify some information and provide credit information about the buyer. So we're going to click on the credit information button. And by the way, if, for example, you had identified a guarantor, for example, in this transaction, that entity would also appear here with another link for credit information that you would need to fill out. In this case, we only have just the one buyer. Next screen, it's asking us yeah.
I'm sorry. Basically, the PSOR is either buyer or guarantor participant roles. So if for some reason your buyer and guarantor were identified as different roles, the system would ask you to select who is the PSOR on this transaction. So based on that, you would fill out the credit information just for the PSOR. So in the event if your buyer and guarantor were the same, it'd be one and the same. But really, if it's two different, that's where, you know.
Okay. Thank you. Good clarification. Thank you. So it's asked to select the risk category and whether the buyer is a sovereign, public, non-sovereign, or private. We're going to say it's private. And it's asking whether it's a financial institution, and it is not. And we will press continue. And now it's going to ask for all sorts of information about the buyer. I'm not going to go through filling all of this out because it would take some time, but we can walk through the various questions and maybe point out a couple of things. The first question is, does the exporter have any experience with the buyer? If the answer is no, then you won't need to fill out any of this information, if I'm not mistaken. If the answer is yes, then you want to begin filling out the information. First question is the date of the first sale to the buyer. That's any sale, credit or non-credit. The next question is going to ask you the first date of the first credit sale. That's an important distinction to make. And looking down here, it asks you for information both for the current year and the prior 2 years, assuming that information is available. If you're filling out the current year, you're just going to fill out the period within this current year that you're providing this information for. It's asking for the total amount, and here what it's really asking for is the total credit that has been provided.
That would be the total sold to within that period.
Okay,
Yeah.
so the total sales
Yeah.
To that particular buyer within this current year period. And then the next question is asking you the portion of that was credit sales in particular. So we want to know total sales, but also total credit sales. The next question, highest amount outstanding for which exporter has been paid. And here, what they're asking is the highest single dollar amount that was ever outstanding and paid at one point in time. Next question is asking you for the payment terms of the transactions. Typically open account, not necessarily. The payment terms, tenor, and you can select those. It's asking you to indicate whether you have any amounts owing right now, what your payment history is, whether they're prompt or typically 30, 60 or more days slow. If there's any amount past due, the due date, and the reason why, if there is. I'm going to say no here, and I'm going to press continue. So we're back to our screen here, and now I can press continue, I believe. Right. So now we're moving on to the product section of the application. And on this screen, we will just click on add a new product. We need to tell Ex-Im Bank what products we're actually shipping here. Now, there's two ways to complete this particular screen and provide this information. One is to fill out the NAICS code if you have it and enter it in the box down here. Or you can go through this methodical process that will actually zero in on the NAICS code for that particular product. But you don't need to do both. You need to do 1 through 6, or you can fill out the NAICS code. But you do need to provide information in the bottom here for a description of the product or service. And I believe that what you enter here is what will actually appear in the insurance policy declarations page. So let's see how this works. We're not going to fill out, we don't know what the NAICS code is, so first we're going to pick one of these. And I know what sector I had before. Let's say tiles, so I'm going to say it's construction. It's now going to ask for my subsector, but I need to pre-populate the subsectors for the construction sector by pressing on that link, show subsectors. Now I can press the drop-down screen and choose from these 3 options. And then we're going to dive to the next level. Again, I'm going to press show product and service to pre-populate the next drop-down, which is here. And as you can see down here is the tile and terrazzo contractors that I selected in the beginning of the application. Okay, so now I can skip the NAICS code entry and enter the name of the product. And I've completed my information, so I'm going to click Add Product at the bottom of the screen. And now it takes me back to that previous screen where there were no products, and now we have the products we're shipping on the screen here. Again, you have links that will allow you to update the information, to view what you've just entered, or to delete it and start again. Assuming that that's all the products we're going to be exporting, we're going to press Continue. And now you're going to be taken to a series of quite important questions about the nature of the exports that you are exporting, and we're going to walk through each of these one at a time. The first one is, are these products manufactured or reconditioned in the U.S.? And we will say yes. Are these products shipped from the U.S.? We will say yes. Are these products on the munitions control list? We're fairly confident that that is not the case. Are these products sold to military entities or security forces? I'm actually going to check that one yes, to see what happens. Are these products used to support nuclear energy? No. Are the products new? Yes. Are they used? No. Are the products capital goods that will be used to produce exportable products? No, we're just exporting the tile. We're not exporting any equipment that will actually manufacture the tile. Will any value be added to the product after export from the U.S.? Let's check yes and see what happens. Has the transaction been considered for any other export credit insurer? No. Do these products or their use meet Ex-Im Bank's requirements for environmentally beneficial determination? No. These are going to default to no, by the way, so you'll need to change those to yes if it happens to be the case. Do the products or their use meet Ex-Im Bank's requirements for any renewable energy determination? I'm going to check that yes for the fun of it. I don't know if this is going to be relevant, but I'm going to put that in there just in case. And now we're going to go to questions about the SBA definition of small business and make sure that you are meeting the requirements with respect to content. So the first question here, and you'll see these on the other application forms as well, was each of the products to be covered under the policy manufactured or reconditioned with more than 50% U.S. content? And we're saying yes. It says in question B, if the answer to A is no, because one or more of your products contains less than 50% U.S. content, then coverage is available for the U.S. content only in each product with less than 50% U.S. content. So now it's asking you to please indicate if you're seeking coverage for products that have less than 50% U.S. content. And we're going to check no. Third required question, if the answer to A is no, you may also obtain coverage on an aggregated basis for all products on an invoice, provided that a content report is submitted at the time of shipment. There is a reference here to a fact sheet. Again, I don't think that link is working correctly, but we will address that later on. So again, to keep this application relatively simple, we're going to put no there. I believe, and Amy, if you know, I'm not mistaken, if you click yes to this, you're going to be asked to or will be required to provide some additional information with respect to how invoices are being aggregated or not.
Yeah, I think the only time they need to submit the extra information is when they do the shipment report.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Not at the application
Not at the
stage,
application stage.
but this is kind of warning them that they're going to have that already, you know, when the time comes.
Okay, very good. So this next question, since we are an SBA business, we're just going to answer this. You shouldn't have to. Huh?
You only have to answer one.
You only have to answer one?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Then let's press continue. So this screen came up because you'll recall that we selected yes with respect to the sales to the military. So this next screen will flag any of those items that you checked that are going to require closer scrutiny. And so here we're just going to say that we sell files to the Army. It does give you the option to quit here if you feel like you selected something that's not going to be accepted, but I suggest you click continue because it will let you proceed. And now it's asking you for information about the finance structure of the transaction. The first question is the payment terms, transaction type. We'll select open account, payment terms. Expected date of shipment. We'll put today's date. Shipment to date. Now that may not be entirely clear, but that's intended to mean the last date on which you expect to make the last shipment if you're going to be making multiple shipments. So in this case, I will be making several shipments. So I'm going to put my last shipment date in there. The expected highest amount outstanding during the shipment period, again, taking into account maybe any payments that, progress payments that may be made. It's going to say 10,000. And lastly, whether there's any security available. I'm going to say none, but you can see the various options that are available here. And I'm going to press continue.
This is Amy. I was just going to add about that shipment to date that in almost all cases, we will default any quote to a 12-month policy period, pretty much whatever they fill in there. There may be times when the underwriter will notice that it's an unusual date and will ask you about it, but in most cases, we'll do a 12-month quotation.
Okay, thank you, Amy. Next screen is giving you the opportunity to provide any additional information that you want to type out in this particular box here. I don't know if there's anything in particular that underwriters find useful, but my advice is more is always better. The more information you can provide to the underwriter to put the entire transaction in context, the better. So I visited this particular buyer several times at their headquarters. I think it's useful for Ex-Im Bank to know that we have a good relationship with them already. And so we've entered that information and we're going to press continue. And now it's going to tell you the type of information that you need to attach depending on the limits that you are requesting. And you see it's got the 4 tiers depending on the limits from 0 to 50,000. From 50,000 to 100, 100 to 300, and 300 to $1 million, or more than $1 million, in which case it's referring you to the credit standards. This link is supposed to take you to the credit standards. Unfortunately, that's not where it takes you, so we will be correcting that link as well. But we're going to need to provide some basic information here, even though our shipment is less than 50,000. We're going to attach that attached link, and it will take us to this page where it will let us browse our computer and attach particular documents. I won't do that right now, but I'm sure all of you have seen a function like this at some point in time, whether on your work computer or otherwise. I'm going to go back. I'm going to continue because I've attached the information. Okay, I guess it's asking me to attach something, it looks like. Is that the case? Let's try that again. So continue. No, sorry, okay. So we've pressed continued. We've attached the information you have to provide, and now it's going to take you to this summary of your entire application. This is a chance to review everything that you've provided. And it's a good idea to take the time to do that carefully. And once you do that, you will be able to go to the bottom of the screen. And there you can press a back button if you want to go back, or you can go back to one of the sections of the application here. But if you're otherwise satisfied with all the information, we'll go to the bottom and press continue. And here we're at the last stage of the application. Very important here that you open this application certification, read it, print it, and sign it. Now we're talking about the exporter here. So let's click on that. And this will take you to the basic certifications and notices. This is a very important document. These can come into play when it comes claim time, so do take the time to read this. And if you understand it all and are happy with it, you then want to print it, sign it, scan it, and then you can go back into your application. You can save and exit the application, and then go back into it. You can start a saved application as we did in the beginning of this webcast, and then go to this section of the application and attach it. So we've done that. We're happy. We've answered all of our questions. We've attached our attachments, and we're going to submit. Errors. This is handy. So this is what happens when you make a mistake somewhere along the way. So not a bad way to learn how to do this. So it's flagged two things. It's saying all U.S. exporters and suppliers associated with the application must have a DUNS number. Oh, okay. So it's giving me the opportunity to go back to where I didn't do that. They must be talking about, I don't know if the exporter here on the very front page, because that screen lets you proceed without entering the DUNS number, but it looks like it is in fact a required field.
That's
okay.
right.
Submission time.
Right. So we're going back to the original page. There actually should be an asterisk here, so we've made note of that. You will need to provide the DUNS number. I can't really do that right now, can I?
Yeah, because this is not a real company.
It's not a real company, so I can't do that. So anyway, let's go back to the submit screen, and hopefully we'll go back here again. The next one is environmentally beneficial question has to be selected yes if renewable energy question is selected yes. Okay, so let's go back to that one. And that was this one.
Go to your update.
Right here?
Yeah. Let you do it there or no? Okay. And go back to your transaction description.
Yeah, I think that's
Yeah.
where it is. Oh, no.
It's the next finance dimension.
Is that it?
No.
It's under your transaction description.
So?
And if you hit continue, see what happens. There you
Yeah.
go.
Oh, yeah.
That's it.
So that's where it was.
Yep.
Oh, I had provided information related to the fact that we thought there might be an environmental benefit because the furnaces we use to fire our tiles are LEED approved and state of the art. So we thought, why not mention that? We'll see if that counts for anything. So we clicked that yes, and now let's go back to the submit button and see if we have satisfactorily addressed that item. Apparently not.
You didn't hit continue, so it didn't save your.
Oh, okay. Another good lesson learned here. Where did we say it was?
Yeah, just hit continue. There you go.
So I changed my answer, but I didn't continue, which didn't save it, and I didn't save an exit either. So you can see it's defaulted back to no here. So this is actually a good lesson in some of the nuances of how Exim Online works. If you do go back and change something, you're going to want to press continue or save and exit to save the information. I'm getting an error message at the top. This is what will happen if you've entered something incorrectly.
It needs comment.
Aha, so I checked yes, but now I also need to provide some comments. Okay. And we're going to save again. Let's go back to submit again. And we'll try again. See, we only have the one error now here. So I can't enter a DUNS number because this is not a real company. But assuming I have successfully done so, I would select the resubmit or submit button depending on the circumstances. And I'll get a sort of a screen that will confirm that the application has been submitted. You want to take note of this tracking number, which will appear when the application is started. That is the identifying number for any communications you have with Ex-Im Bank, and that will be cited in DOL automated communications to the exporter and the broker. So that is basically the ESS application. I'm just going to look around the room here to see if anyone in the room, the resident experts on this, have any other insights they want to add. And in the meantime, I'm going to go over and see if we have any questions that have come in.
I just have one comment, that once you submit it, it'll show up under your pending applications on your landing page. They'll be able to see that.
Good point. So, yes, we can't do that now because we can't submit it, but it would show up under this link here. Pending means submitted in Ex-Im Bank language. So I'm looking for questions here. Okay, we get this question frequently, and it's why Ex-Im Banks ask certain questions in the beginning of the application with respect to the ownership of the company, woman-owned, veteran-owned, or what have you. And I don't, basically, I think this is monitored for statistical reasons and or perhaps associated with certain mandates that we have to track that sort of information so that we can report it to the appropriate authorities, which in this case is probably Congress.
Yeah, we would really appreciate it. I know sometimes exporters think they're prying, but we would appreciate it if, to the degree that they're willing to, they would check yes or no to, in particular, the minority or women-owned business or veteran-owned business question.
And that was the only question. I'll throw it out there one more time to see if anyone wants to send in any questions. I'm not seeing anything coming in. All right, well, thank you very much for joining us on this webcast. We'll be having another webcast in approximately 3 months, subject matter to be determined. And hopefully Congress will keep us in business by midnight tonight, and we'll see you tomorrow. Thanks again, and have a good day.